Everyone will be getting started in just a moment. Everyone, as everyone's filtering in, I'm just going to get us started here. Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Erin Driscoll. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Wilmington Memorial Library. I want to thank our neighboring libraries in Billerica, Chelmsford, North Reading, and Tewksbury for their support, and I want to welcome their patrons as well. We are in a Zoom webinar room this evening, so we won't see you or hear you in the audience, but we do please encourage you to enter any questions you have for Meg Lowman in the chat at the bottom of your screen. If you shake your mouse, you'll see the chat feature down there. Meg Lowman is an American biologist, educator, ecologist, writer, editor, and public speaker. She is the executive director of the Tree Foundation and a professor at the National University of Singapore, Arizona State University, and University Sands, Malaysia. Nicknamed the real-life Lorax by National Geographic and Einstein of the Treetops by the Wall Street Journal, Meg Lowman pioneered the science of canopy ecology. Her motto is "No child left indoors." I'm going to turn it over to Meg for some slides.
Oh, thanks, Erin. So I'm happy to be here and share a few pictures with you, take you to the canopy for a couple of minutes, and then I'll turn it back to Erin for questions and anything else you might need to know about my book or the career or whatever is happening, but it is really wonderful to be here. So I just published a memoir called The Arbonaut, A Life Discovering the Eighth Continent and the Trees Above Us. I'm guessing it will be in the library, and my hope is that girls will really learn from my misadventures, as I call them. And as the mother of two boys, I hope that boys too will benefit from thinking about all the amazing questions and adventures that are left on our planet. The tops of trees have never been explored in the way they deserve. So there's all sorts of things to discover on this planet. So with that, I'll just give a couple little highlights from the book. I do start out by sharing my childhood. It's a little embarrassing because I was such a geek. There wasn't that word in the 1960s when I was a child. The word geek, I don't think, was in the Oxford Dictionary, but I collected things. I loved nature. Most of my little friends in school made fun of me because of that. And lo and behold, I took this little wildflower collection to the New York State Science Fair when I was in 5th grade and scared to death and never uttered a word if I didn't have to. But lo and behold, I got a second prize and felt almost like I was Rachel Carson or Harriet Tubman or some of the 2 or 3 women I absolutely adored and loved, although they were deceased. But that was how I grew up. No internet, no phone, cell phones, no movie theater in my small town. So it is kind of amazing that I took to nature, and maybe that was what led me to this career in trees. So I move on in the book to talk about my love affair with trees and the fact that because almost no one had ever been to the top of a tree, I had to invent all the methods. And what's pretty crazy, and I start out with this in the book, is that, you know, for 100 years, foresters only studied the big toe of the tree, the bottom, the very bottom. And if you went to a doctor and said, you know, he said, I'm going to look at your big toe, and I think now your brain is healthy and your ears are fine and you can see well, you would probably switch doctors. But for a long time, foresters looked at the bottom of the tree, and if they wanted to see the top, they cut the tree down. And of course, all the animals were squished and the insects flew away. So lo and behold, we had almost no knowledge about the tops of trees before a handful of us became this thing called an Arbonaut. Aquanauts explore the undersea because scuba was invented in the 1950s. Astronauts explore outer space when space travel became available in the 1960s. But guess what? Nobody discovered or explored the tops of trees until the 1980s. And that's where the word Arbonaut was coined. So in my book, I hope that I tell a story that's worthy of both boys and girls to read, and also basically serves as a voice for the trees. I sometimes wished I'd studied dolphins or orangutans, because I think some of those charismatic animals have a much better chance of being noticed. And trees kind of go behind the scenes and nobody's really speaking out for them. But I am a real lover of trees and leaves and all the things that live in the leaves. So that's really what my book is all about. And so with that, I'm excited to share it with all of you. And one of my first discoveries, which was so critical, important to me and others, is the fact that half of the creatures on the land part of our planet live in the tops of trees. And yet we've probably only discovered 10% to date. So this is pretty scary. We probably know more about the moon than we know about what lives in the tops of trees. So that's a pretty amazing fact. And I hope it inspires some of the young people listening to this to think about a career as an Arbonaut. It's really daunting because it's hard to believe that we overlooked this little space above our heads, but we did. And now we have to make up for it quick time, because those things and those leaves and the tops of trees in general are truly what drives the planet and keeps us healthy, which is very, very important. So here's a little timeline of the book. I talk about being one of the world's first Arbonauts in the late 1979 and 80s. I had to make a slingshot and mold it from a piece of metal in the shop at Sydney University. I had to sew my first harness. I had to borrow ropes from the caving club, and lo and behold, I climbed my first trees and found out that all sorts of creatures were living up there. And then I went on to think to myself, my gosh, how can you take 10 students up a tree? If they're all on one rope, it will break and they'll die. So I had to figure out a new method. And lo and behold, I worked on one of the first treetop walks, or aerial walkways, which was built in Queensland, Australia. And that was fantastic for letting all sorts of volunteers and students work on treetop biodiversity at the same time. And then I went on to become a canopy expert, published the first textbook on canopies, and chair the first conferences, and was invited to be on a advisory board to create construction cranes in the canopy, and then to create the first canopy walkway in North America, which I built at Williams College, where I was a professor at the time. So everything is adding up to the toolkit. How do we develop the tools to get to the tops of trees so we can figure out what lives there? And lo and behold, I worked with a fabulous French team who pioneered inflatables. So we took this hot air balloon all around the world. We landed that very cool raft that looks like a bicycle tire on the very tippy tops of trees to study what lived there, which was totally awesome and fun. And then when I was back in North America, after living in Australia for some 13 years, I built the first public canopy walkway in a state park in Florida, which to this day brings in 500,000 visitors, about $25 million of revenue. And so the end result is these canopy walkways can compete with Disney World. They can compete with computer screens and be these wonderful places where families take their kids to discover nature, and in turn pay a bit of a fee or stay in a resort to give back to the indigenous people who might be operating the canopy walkway. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So I started a foundation to fund constructing canopy walkways so people could donate with tax deductions. And I ended up writing this book called The Arbonaut, which is the purpose of this talk, because I am at a library tonight, and my new book hopefully tells you about my misadventures as well as some of the advances in saving the treetops, and ends up with my newest project called Mission Green about how to really save trees. So what's in the book? Well, first of all, most people don't know that trees are worth a lot of money. They're worth more than just the property of the real estate where someone's trying to build a mall or a garage, but they provide fresh water, which is worth billions of dollars a year as it filtrates through their leafy canopy. They produce oxygen from their leaves, which is worth another billions of dollars. They provide sustainable timber and food if we take care of the forests properly. They conserve soil because big trees have root systems that help keep the water, which is very important. You now know from my exploits climbing trees that they are home to over half of what species live on the land component of our planet. They store carbon, all that crazy stuff that goes into the atmosphere when we pollute the world is now being absorbed by trees, and those big tree trunks contain a lot of carbon. Big forests control our climate. The Amazon has more control on the rainfall of North America than any other entity of the world, and yet we continue to destroy it and fragment it and burn it and do terrible things, even though it's trying its very best to give us the proper amount of rainfall and temperature, et cetera, et cetera. So in the end, one last thing is for 2 billion people, trees and forests provide a spiritual heritage. In Ethiopia and India, many parts of Asia, trees are this refuge for religion, for sanctuary, for safety, and we can't overlook the value of that. I don't know a dollar sign, but it's a really, really important way to value our trees. Another big part of my book is trying to explain how important trees are to kids, especially girls. And on the left, you'll see some of my newest tree climbers from the Meg Lowman treetops camp in my very hometown of Elmira, New York, where there's not a whole lot of industry or wealth. And so taking some of the girls from the local middle school and teaching them to climb and giving them biology lessons has been a fabulous way for me to give back to my hometown. And on the right, you'll see a bunch of kids in a canopy walkway, which is Sarasota, Florida. And those third graders have been to the walkway, looked outside of the actual bridge, and saw a thing, a beetle eating bromeliad tanks. And guess what? They were part of a team that discovered a new species, and now they are published in the scientific literature because these kids observed and saw something wonderful in the canopy that no one else had ever seen. And also in my book, I have about 5 case studies of the most critical forests of the world where we need to save them: the Amazon, India, in this case, the forests of Ethiopia, which I hope you'll enjoy these couple pictures. But here's most of Ethiopia having subsistence agriculture, very dry, very rough, because there's no irrigation, there are no tractors, no metal tools. And lo and behold, the only leftover sanctuary for native birds, animals, and insects are the churchyards, which we call the church forests. So there's the church in the middle, and here are the trees surrounding the church. So any priest who has a church says that the only way to prove success is to have a church forest, which means he is helping save all of God's creatures. Now, I, as a biologist, want to save biodiversity. So guess what? We have the same mission, saving these amazing species. But this poor priest has no computer or cell phone or ability to have images about what goes on around him. So he doesn't know the forests are endangered. And that's where my job comes in. As a partner to the country of Ethiopia, I need to help the priests understand this incredible value of their churches. We need to solve the problem of deforestation, and we need to educate the kids about how to become good stewards of the church. So here's the first part. I've created a very trusting relationship with the head priest, so much so that he's building me a little cottage on his property so I can be there to help oversee forest conservation. And the crazy thing is, most people think religion and science don't go together, but they do. And I talk about that in my book, and I hope you read it and appreciate that link. Our simple solution, which I also talk about in the book, is educating the priests by giving them Google Earth images, by explaining how little forest is left in Ethiopia, less than 5% in the northern half of the country, and then by giving them the solution, which they invented. The priests came to me after year one and said, what if we take the rocks out of the farmers' fields? What if we build walls to keep the cattle from eating the seedlings and trees? And lo and behold, that's exactly what we did. So today, if you go to Ethiopia, you'll see these fabulous walls, behind which are these amazing homes for the genetic library of Ethiopia. And outside is this crazy subsistence agriculture, which still has no solution because Western countries aren't funding that type of thing at this point in time. Even the Gates Foundation is not up there helping with irrigation or things like important metal tools. So without sustainable farming, we know that the farmers have to cut more trees down and clear more land in order to feed their kids. So what's the challenge? The challenge for all of you, which I outline in my book and describe in the last chapter, is we've lost a half of the world's primary forests in my lifetime. We've got to figure something out really fast. We cannot take our time. You could put important paintings in a storage room and wait 100 years to, clean them and recreate them, but we can't wait 100 years to save our forests because they'll all be gone. And so I started a program called Mission Green. I talk about it in the book, which is to help globally promote conservation with good economic stewardship and education programs to really and truly save the most urgently degraded forest in the world, with scientists, local people, students, and philanthropists. So my actual model is based on a friend of mine named Sylvia Earle, who started Mission Blue, which is similar to Mission Green, of course. And Sylvia wanted to draw attention to what she calls hope spots, places in the ocean where high biodiversity exists and people need to start saving it, not fishing it. So she did this in 2010. In 10 years, she's created 100 hope spots, which simply draw attention to the importance of keeping those forests conserved and intact. And I hope to do the same with Mission Green, draw attention to the world's most important forests and help local people save them if we can. My partner in crime and the emeritus advisory chair of my board is Ed Wilson at Harvard, who wrote a fabulous book 2 years ago called Half Earth, where he proposed, could we save half the earth for 99% of biodiversity and the other half for humans only? And through that book, he also listed the 15 or so most endangered forests, a list contributed by global forest biologists, including myself. And so we're using that list with Mission Green to say, these are the forests we need to save. They include Florida, the California redwoods, Madagascar, Mozambique, India, Bhutan, the Amazon. And so we're hoping to design canopy walkways, hire indigenous people to run the ecotourist lodges, the boats, lead educational tours and bird watching, and basically gain a sustainable income through ecotourism, not from logging. And we're very excited. We have a walkway in Peru now, but we're about to design the education programs. We have an amazing walkway in Malaysia funded by one philanthropist, and we're also about to design the education programs. We have a 20-year-old walkway in my hometown of Florida, in a state park where we're trying to tweak all the ADA opportunities for different handicapped students, wheelchair mobility limited students, deaf students, blind students. We want everyone to come to the forest and experience its beauty, even though their limitations might be diverse. So stay tuned as we try to create for Mission Green this global opportunity to share forest canopies with kids and families, make nature so exciting that every kid will want to save forests, as well as you who are listening. And hopefully we can do that by raising $10 million in the next 10 years to build these 10 canopy walkways and train the local people. So with that, here's a quote that I use on my website. It is like a hospital emergency room. We have to focus on the most important and most endangered forests. It's great to plant trees and everyone should do that, but they're not about to save all the biodiversity in the world, because it takes 100 or even 1,000 years to recreate a forest and for those species to move back, even if they are still alive. So we really need to save the forests we have. We need to save the big trees, most of all, and that in turn will lead to good things. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Erin, and maybe she can lead a little Q&A. So thanks.
Certainly, yes. And if anyone has questions, please type them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Meg, I love your motto, no child left indoors. And you went into it a little bit. It seems like you were a nature enthusiast starting pretty young. Did you always want to study trees? What?
You know, I was such a geek, and that word did not exist then, but I was like that shy kid that didn't want to really do, manicures and go to the mall. I love to go to nature, but I think it's because I was shy, and trees did not yell at me. They did not bully me. It was a very safe environment to go to the forest in those days. And so I think that's where my love began, was just this trusted environment. And a couple of my friends climbed trees with me, which I give them full credit in my book. A few of them helped me with tree forts. And again, I talk about that in the book, which is really fun and important, because I think most kids have climbed a tree or want to climb a tree. And maybe that's a little bit of a basis for creating trust and energy and inspiration about tree conservation. So I am excited, but I was really and truly I was nothing but ordinary. I had no scientists nearby, no museums nearby. And in my book, I try to say to kids, if you're the most ordinary kid on the block, you too could still grow up and be a scientist or do something extraordinary if you just choose to. So I want kids to succeed, and I'm really excited if they read my book about that.
Oh, and you really were a pioneer in canopy research. How did you develop your method for climbing tall trees?
Totally by mistake. I'll be the most honest person. I was not one of these leaders or innovative people in my day as a student. In fact, I was so amazed growing up in rural upstate New York that trees turned color in the autumn. The leaves fell off. It was a brilliant show for 2 weeks, and then they were gone. And so I dreamed of going to the tropics because I heard that was green all the time. And I got to Australia as a graduate student on a scholarship, to which I'm very grateful. And lo and behold, I went out to the rainforest for my first time ever. And there it was, green, 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 all the way up. I couldn't even see the top, and I was so scared. And I thought, well, how about if I train a monkey to go up and get leaves for me? Or what if I get a telephoto lens and take pictures? And my advisor at Sydney University said, oh, no, 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 no. You will have to go up there. If you want to look at leaves and study them, you have to go up to where they live. And I was horrified. I thought, oh, no way. But anyway, I welded a slingshot from a piece of metal that allowed me to put a string over a tree, and borrowed a rope from the caving club to take the string and tie on a rope and get a rope over a branch. And then I borrowed the sewing machine from the caving club and built my first harness out of seatbelt webbing by sewing it together. And I got a couple pieces of equipment from the cavers, including the loan of a rope. And whereas they went down, I had to go up. So it was amazing, but they were my role models way back in the beginning. And I was scared out of my wits. It was the wind was blowing, everything was happening. But when I got into the canopy, oh my gosh, it was like this riotous, wonderful world of zillions of insects and amazing plants and amazing leaves and sunlight and productivity and flowering and leafing. And so all of a sudden I was hooked on getting to the top of every tree. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted, Erin.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it looks like we have a lot of questions from the audience in the chat. One question from Teresa, is your book for kids, adults, or both?
Oh, great question. I feel like it's from anybody from middle school up. I tried to write for a public audience. I love when girls get to read the book because I try to explain a little bit about some of my misadventures, I call them, when I was working in a male dominant world. And I should have been smarter, and maybe girls can benefit from my book. Definitely easy read for adults, but I would say from, grade 5 to 95 is perfect.
Excellent. Another question is, do you know if there are any public canopy walks in New England?
Oh, yes. In fact, I've been so honored. I actually helped to build the first canopy walkway in Queensland, which you'll read about in the book. Came back to America as a professor at Williams College, where I built the first North American canopy walkway, but on the campus, so it's not open to anyone but students and faculty. And then looking around, I ended up in Florida building this first public canopy walkway in Florida. But meantime, a lot of other people heard about these walkways. So I'm so excited. We now have a walkway at Millbrook School in Millbrook, New York. We have a walkway in the Adirondacks with the Wilds. We have the newest walkway in Quechee, Vermont, at the VINS, the Vermont Institute of Nature Studies. It's fabulous. It even has a spider web in it, meaning a rope web where kids can jump up and down and be very safe. So I'm excited as all get out that we have these great walkways. And one is being planned in my little hometown of Elmira, New York. And I sure hope they get the fundraising to succeed with that. So enjoy, if you live in New England, all these canopy walkways.
We have a question from Catherine. What is the significance of your tattoo?
Oh, right. And that picture is so great. I work in the Amazon. I've been working there for 28 years. I first started there because I had this amazing opportunity with a very cool guy named Bob Ballard. After he discovered the Titanic, he said, I'm starting this virtual expedition program for middle schools to go undersea, but I need someone to do something on land. And lo and behold, he picked me as a canopy person on Arbonaut and said, that would be an exciting match with my undersea world. So for about 12 years, we did these programs, and I would go to the Amazon every year, or not every year, but occasionally, in Panama and Belize, and we would broadcast to millions of kids. And when I was there, the shaman, the medicine man, would always give everyone on the crew a tattoo. It only lasts for 2 weeks because it's like henna. But I always picked a tarantula because when my kids were little, we had a pet tarantula. Why? Because we traveled a lot. I was a single mom. I couldn't leave them home alone or I'd be arrested. So we had this tarantula because once a month it needed one cricket to survive, so we could always travel. If we had a dog or a cat, as you know, we would have had all these incredible expenses and challenge to keep it home alone. So that was the story of having a tarantula tattoo. But secretly, it only lasted 2 weeks. I would always go home and show my mother, and she'd be horrified, but they wash away. But every summer I would get a new one. And I continue to do these, what I call citizen science trips to the Amazon, bringing families and teachers and kids so that everyone could experience this. If you have a modest budget, it's not expensive, but it's really important, I think, to give kids this opportunity. I hope they'll start next summer, but with COVID, I'm not sure when we'll get back on track.
Excellent. And speaking of your boys, did they come with you in your research? It seems like you had to travel to quite remote locations.
Almost always. Occasionally my parents would babysit, but they were scared if I went somewhere where they couldn't call me because they thought maybe they would be too responsible. But we had a lot of fun. And for the most part, yes, they came to a lot of destinations. You know, kids are great counters of beetles, you know, measures of leaves. They created for me a sense of wonder having them on board, even though it was tiring and a little bit scary to worry about their safety. They always asked the best questions. And so we had a lot of fun. I have a book called It's a Jungle Up There. It's by me plus my two boys, because we co-authored a book that includes a lot of their diaries or journal entries on every single trip, because I always made them take notes. And, you know, they would say something, for example, like, our mom is measuring leaves in the tree today. She is the weirdest mom we've ever had. You know, it was very fun to see the world through their eyes.
Excellent. One of our patrons has asked if you have ever had any falls or near misses while you've been climbing.
All right, great question. One time, and only once, I'm happy to say, I did fall out of a gum tree, a eucalyptus, but only from about 15 feet high. And that's because I forgot to clasp my safety rigging. You know, like a bicycle, you have to check all of your hardware and your gear. And I was in a hurry. It was about to thunder and lightning, and I was trying to get down the tree. And I was lucky I escaped just with bruises, but it had some mental bruises with it. I thought to myself, am I really capable of doing this stuff that's really a man's world? It gave me a lot of pause, but fortunately I didn't let it deter me, and it didn't break any bones. So that was pretty lucky. Mostly it's a safe environment if you're careful about the branches where you put the rope, and you're very careful to check your safety gear.
Yes. See, other questions. Oh, we have a couple of questions in the chat. I know there's been a lot of exciting kind of things we've learned about trees recently, such as kind of the communication between trees through their root network. Is there any, have you discovered any of that in your research, tree communication?
Absolutely. And I talk about in the book, I started working on that in the 1980s, a long time ago. There were a bunch of us that were working on that. In the tropics, admittedly, trees don't do that. They mainly do that in very unusual places like the Pacific Northwest, where a recent author talked about it, because most of the trees are the same species. But in the tropics, they're all different species. So it doesn't really benefit them to communicate, because they want to help their own offspring, not someone else's offspring, if that makes sense. But the other cool thing is there were some professors at Penn State and in Yale in the 1980s as well that discovered trees communicate in the canopy. They send out oils and scents that get transmitted. So when a bug is eating a maple tree in New Hampshire, it sends out a volatile oil that gets picked up by the oak tree nearby and the maple tree nearby, and they all communicate from above ground as well. So a lot of this is very old news. I mean, it's so interesting, but we have known about that, and it's so cool, and it's so much fun. And so, yeah, it still exists in many, many ways.
No, we never really think of plants communicating, but it sounds like there's a lot going on there. Have you discovered new species in your research?
All the time. In fact, almost everything I saw in the canopy was a new species. And here's an interesting thing you need to know. A taxonomist is a person who describes and classifies new species. An ecologist, which I am, is a person that studies the relationships. But you almost can't do both, because each one takes 24 hours in a day. So I always was picking up new species and carefully recording the notes and putting them in a jar, and then mailing them to a museum where taxonomists have a full-time living describing new species, writing it out in Latin, comparing it to the drawers in the museum of other bugs that are pinned, and then confirming the new species. I published a few new species, but it's a big job for someone who's not used to writing in Latin and looking at all the hairs on every leg and all this stuff. But I was so thankful that I had this amazing colleague group of taxonomists, people that I could mail my specimens to and say, hey, you will love this. You'll be able to get a new publication, and here's something from 120 feet in a sassafras tree. And most of the entomologists, the bug scientists, were really excited to get my collections of new species.
Excellent. Well, we have a question from Catherine. Are your airships, like the hot air balloons and the canopy, oh, what did you call it? The canopy net.
Yeah,
yeah. Do you use those in the US as well?
We never have. We never ever have. And you know what? It costs about $1 million to fund an expedition with 50 scientists and all the inflatables and their engineers. We've done Cameroon and French Guiana and Australia and a few other places, but never North America. I brought them to Florida to display for the second ever International Canopy Conference, which was fabulous. But to have $1 million, even though it's so cheap compared to a NASA budget or a medical budget, it's way beyond the affordability of most field biologists. So we have never used that device here, but wouldn't it be great if anyone wants to write a check, please contact me, because there's so much to learn even about our North American forest canopies that we have no idea. We just guess about it. We don't really know. And so we need to learn more. It would be so exciting.
Laura has learned about the desertification that is happening around the world. What are some ways that ordinary citizens can help reverse this phenomenon?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking. First of all, we need to save big trees. Big trees are the home to biodiversity. You can't put koalas in baby seedlings and expect them to have a lifestyle. We need to save the big trees. So the most important thing is in your neighborhood, in your community, make great big strict regulations. People should not cut down trees to widen roads or build a mall or expand their garage. They could maybe develop other opportunities and creative, architecture. Make a little courtyard if you're building a mall and save that wonderful big tree if you can. So it's really, really important to do that. And we also need to educate everybody. We need, if you want to buy my book or you want to go online and look at my website, we need kids to learn about big trees. We need adults. And in America, one of the biggest problems is we buy a lot of stuff that causes deforestation. We buy soy from the Amazon. We buy palm oil in our makeup and our plastic that is causing the forests of Malaysia and Indonesia to be cut down. We buy timber from places that are not sustainably grown, but we never ask about it. We buy coffee from places that have cut forests down and are grown in the sun instead of in the shade under the tree canopy. So please, please, please beg your local politicians, beg all of your Starbucks, your grocery stores, your Whole Foods, please put a label on my product. I want to know where my food comes from because I don't want to be buying stuff that's killing my grandchildren. And I think we all need to insist the American government does much better on giving us the origin of our products, because otherwise we are causing deforestation. And I don't think most people buy things like makeup or plastic saying, oh, I want to kill my grandchildren because I'm going to cut down all the forests of the world. I think we are very naive because we don't have the policies of labeling our products as much as other countries do.
Thank you. Catherine would like to know if there are any citizen science opportunities for ordinary citizens to gather data about tree observations. She's thinking about the eBird app for bird watchers. Is there any equivalent?
Right. And that's a great question because there really aren't right now. I was part of the team that hired a group called iNaturalist when I was the science director at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, but it only creates records of the locations of different things. I love your idea. I need to figure out a solution to that. You can get an app to identify your trees, but you're right. There's no app that maps them or distributes them. So I think we need to fix that. And so maybe I can talk to some people and you will be the person that invented this new idea.
Excellent. Charlie would like to know, are there any medicinal qualities or properties discovered in the canopies? He's thinking of the plants discovered in the ground cover of the Amazon rainforest.
All right. Almost everything is in the canopy. Believe it or not, the ground cover is pretty minimal compared to the canopy. The shaman, which I work with shamans every time I go to the Amazon, and they're fabulous, but most of their leaves are canopy trees and they're so knowledgeable. It's fabulous. There are a few shrubs, you're right. There are very few annuals, but there are trees and shrubs, and that forms the basis of the ethnobotanical knowledge. And it is amazing. And in Ethiopia, it's the same. In India, it's the same. It's just we don't hear as much about it, but they all use trees as the basis of their pharmacy, which is very exciting.
Excellent. Mary Ellen would like to know, does eating a plant-based versus a meat-based diet help preserve trees?
Oh, what a great question. And you know what? It's right now, there's a lot of controversy out there. If you eat a little bit less meat, it will help the planet. But here's the tricky part. In some parts of the world, the most important thing is to eat something local. If you ship blueberries from New Zealand as a vegetarian, you are not helping the planet. If you ship soy from Brazil, as a vegan, you are not helping the planet. You need to eat what's local. And in many parts of the world, eating meat is actually the most sustainable thing. I lived in Australia for a long time where sheep were the only thing to grow on the landscape, because if we tried to grow corn or soy, we would have had to add so many fertilizers and water. It would have cost millions of dollars and be ridiculous, but sheep could exist on this very rough grazing land. So it was our ethical and environmental duty to eat lamb as a way of being sustainable on the landscape. Out west in North America, there are places where cattle and sheep also graze, and to grow vegetable crops would be very expensive. But the important thing is to reduce all of that shipping. When you have local vegetables, you should buy those over meat. But if you have vegetables coming from thousands of miles away, it's not a way to help the planet. So we have to really look at that ecological footprint of where our food is coming from, similar to looking at that ecological footprint of where our different purchases are coming from. So, you know, and again, beg your shopping areas, beg Whole Foods and beg Trader Vic's and Trader Joe's or whatever, and beg Publix in my state of Florida. They need to label products and tell us the energy footprint. Until we have that, I think we are all blindly eating probably the wrong foods and we don't even know it.
Thank you. Catherine was wondering if which colleges support strong arbor programs?
Oh, great question. You know, almost none, to be honest. For any students, I would say major in field biology. If you have a college with a research forest, that's fantastic. The most important thing is to check out the specialties of the professors in biology and environmental studies, see if anyone's working on conservation of rainforests or tree methods. It's really sad for me to admit there's no hub per se. You know, I went to Duke because I thought it was a forestry school, but of course, when I went there, I was the only girl and it was so scary that I dropped out. I think it's probably better now. I think you need to look at places that have strong programs in field biology, meaning birds and mushrooms and plants and identifying things in the field. And then secondly, conservation. And there are quite a few hubs for that. And I wish you well. And I think it's also great if you can find programs where they let you do a term abroad. So you could go to Malaysia or you could go to Peru and see the real deal when it comes to conservation, because the best thing we can all do is become global citizens.
Excellent. Let's see. Oh, one thing I wanted to be sure to ask you about, I've seen you've written about the incredible fig. What should we know about that fruit, about figs?
Oh gosh, thanks. You know, fig is my favorite tree. There are somewhat over 700 species of fig, if you can believe it. They produce this amazing fruit that is eaten by trillions of things, including people. And I love figs because I finally figured out as I watched them and climbed them and studied them that, guess what? Some figs, which are called banyan trees or strangler figs, it's about a third of the fig family, actually start life at the top and take their roots down. And most trees start at the bottom as a seedling with their roots and take their structure up, but they have to wait decades and decades to get enough sunlight. So the fig fruits get eaten by a fig bird that poops on a branch and starts the fig growing. And lo and behold, they come down with their root systems. And my analogy to myself as a young person and now to students who are young people, oh my gosh, if only I'd been like a fig, if only I'd thought harder, how do I exploit my resources the most effective way? How do I sometimes even, outcompete my counterparts, which in my case were mostly men in science, and I never figured out how to outcompete them well. So the fig tree is this kind of icon, I think, for young women in science. And I hope you'll read about it in my book, Chapter 6, and know why figs are really critical for women to get a good inspiration.
Yes, there's a term you use in your book, the glass canopy. Can you tell us a bit about that and what advice you would give women?
And that's the same chapter about my fig, my
figs. Okay.
Sheryl Sandberg wrote for corporate people about the glass ceiling. And I thought, you know what, for most women in science, we will never have her paycheck. We will never have her ability to network and buy amazing, restaurant bills or, cars or big houses. But we have to figure out a way, how do women in science modestly achieve success? So I call it the glass canopy, meaning for me as a canopy biologist, I kept hitting my head against all of these different kinds of sort of stresses and situations and hurdles, mostly male bosses. And lots of times, females weren't welcome on expeditions and all sorts of things. So I focused it all in one chapter because I didn't want to have the book peppered with negativity, but I most of all want women to read that chapter so they can do better than me, so they can benefit from what I call my misadventures, where I was not very smart, I was not very strategic, and hopefully they can learn from my example of the fig tree, my example of losing out to male bosses who denigrated me when I was just too dumb to figure out how to do better. So that's what the glass canopy is all about.
Thank you. Susan would like to know, how can more forest canopy studies be encouraged in the U.S.?
That's a great question. And, we need canopies now more than ever. And maybe you can come on my website, www.treefoundation.org. And in particular, look up the section called Mission Green, where I'm developing a whole new program to save the world's best canopies with the highest biodiversity. That includes the Great Smoky Mountains. It includes the California redwoods. Maybe we need the Sky Islands in Arizona. I just got a call today from the Florida Keys, where someone wants to preserve a hammock down there with canopy walkways, which is fabulous. So I think we all need to think hard. How do we get our kids to these fabulous places? Maybe we build a walkway. How do we educate people when they get there? Maybe create cool literature and exhibits. And how do we take that to the next level, educate politicians and create policy to really save big trees, period.
Yes, Mary Ellen asked a question that I think ties into that of how can we incorporate this into the curriculum of schools?
all the time. And I will say there are two children's books written about me. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but one's called The Leaf Detective and the other's called The Most Beautiful Roof. And The Most Beautiful Roof is on the syllabus for about 30 states for middle school science requirements, which has been fantastic. So I do a whole lot of Zoom lectures to middle school kids around the country where the coolest, best teachers seem to find me and say, hey, guess what? You're the star of this book. Could you talk to our students in an assembly? And there's all kinds of ideas that emanate out of that book, you know, measuring leaves or growing trees or doing little studies on bugs. So hopefully kids need to read books about the rainforest. If you're in high school, you could read my other books like the Arbonaut and probably have great benefit. But I think, you know, exposing kids, educating them needs to come from books and school activities. And I'm sure all teachers are on the same wavelength as I am for that.
Excellent. Oh, there's a question in the chat. What is the term for the study of trees? Is there an ology term?
Yeah, dendrology is the study of trees. So an arbornaut is really a focus on the tops of trees because it's kind of an explorer, but dendrology is the cool word.
Teresa would like to know, are you still climbing trees?
Oh, I am. A lot in walkways because then I can take groups of kids, and I'm very passionate about inclusivity. I've been working a lot, if you read the book, to hear about kids who are mobility limited or minority kids. And a lot of times they can't do the crazy rope stuff. They need a few other devices. So I'm really busy trying to create those very easy and safe ways for everybody to get up into the treetops, including myself as I age.
Excellent. Let's see. So we know you had a fall. Have you ever had any other kind of near misses? Have you ever been like bitten or
No, but I'm always
experiences?
wary. I mean, I've had my fair share of insect bites, but to be honest, I've had more mosquito bites living in Florida than I have in the Amazon, just because the ecosystem here is skewed. We've killed out a lot of the predators on mosquitoes with bug sprays and things like that. Whereas the Amazon is this perfect ecosystem where most of the biting things get eaten by something else. But I'm still very cautious. I never got bitten by a poisonous snake in Australia, but I had my fair share and, you know, of experiences. So I think as any biologist, we have to be extra vigilant. So I would be very, you know, foolish to tell you there is no problem. But I also tell kids, I'm a little more scared to cross the street in New York City than I probably am to be in the jungle at night.
Well, Catherine would like to know, what do you do if a canopy visitor discovers that they have a fear of heights?
Oh, and they do a lot. Sometimes the biggest football players are scared to go 2 feet up, but the shyest, timid teachers go 100 feet. So guess what? It's not for everybody, but most times people just, you have to go slowly. You have to take your time. You have to have a coach, which I am a good coach, and work their way through it. And a few of those difficult people took 2 days to go up in the walkway. And the nice thing about most canopy walkways, they have gradations. You go up 10 feet and you walk on a bridge and you go up 10 more feet. So a lot of times people can make these personal challenges come true, and then they eventually get to the very top, which is fun.
Excellent. Oh, here's an interesting question. In New England, are deciduous trees or evergreens more threatened?
Oh my gosh, both. I hate to say it, but almost every tree in North America has a big pest now. And a lot of that is due to the mobility of people bringing in pests, bringing in fungal spores, all sorts of things as they travel around the world. But I don't know one tree that's exempt from something, and that's a concern. And the best thing you can do as a local landowner is plant a diversity of trees. So maybe your dogwood is surrounded by, you know, maples and it will never get discovered. And I mean, if you plant only one species, they're bound to get discovered by the pest insect. But if you have a diverse forest or lawn, hopefully you can help escape those crazy things because they're not as interested in coming to your very small salad bar.
Do you have a favorite forest?
Oh gosh, it's so tough. And kids ask me that all the time.
Mhm.
I love, love, love the Amazon. If I could take you somewhere tonight, I would take you to the Peruvian Amazon upriver because it's much more pristine than Brazil where all the logging is going on. I love Australia because it was my first, but I think the Amazon would give you this amazing, oh wow, sense of really what's all about the planet. And I wished every kid could go there. It would be such a dream.
Oh, Laura has a good question. I think she shares a feeling we all have sometimes. She says, how can we make a difference? I feel so small. Is money the only way to make a change?
I know. That's great. And I say, educate kids, buy those children's books, maybe buy my book and share it with every girl you know. Be careful in what you buy, learn about it, go on my website if you need more knowledge about it. That's really important. And if you're not getting success, go and scream and yell at your grocery store managers and scream and yell at nicely at your local government saying, please make a tree policy for big trees. Please make a policy for labeling products so I know that I don't want to buy soy from the Amazon. You know, we need the voice of the citizens to make those changes because guess what? None of the trees are going to be able to make those changes. They don't have a voice. We have to scream and yell on behalf of the trees.
Thank you. Mary Ellen just said, we found our first spotted lanternfly in Massachusetts. Why has it arrived here and how worried should we be about our trees? I have seen that in the news a lot as well.
With human travel the way it is, and we never require any kind of, state to state kind of border control, it's going to be there. And it's really sad. The best success you will have is making sure you have a diversity of trees in your lawn or your forests, because insects love a salad bar with one species of lettuce if that's their favorite, but they don't like a place where there's 30 species of lettuce and they don't like 29 of those. So just keep advocating for diverse forests and pray a lot too, because I have to say that these insects, with climate change now, it's hotter and drier on occasion, and insects love hot and dry. That's when their epidemics are the greatest. And so we're basically, with all our pollution from cars and manufacturing, we are creating the perfect storm for all these insect outbreaks to occur, which is a little scary.
Oh, here's an interesting question. I know at least in our part of New England, we've had a lot of water this year. Is more water from extreme storms good or bad for trees?
Yes and no, because all sorts of species of trees are different. There are many trees that really need dry soil, and that's better for them. Oaks is a great example. Others can absolutely thrive in wet soil like willows. So every tree species has a slightly different condition. All the rain is maybe good because it drowns some of the insect eggs and maybe there are fewer outbreaks. It also causes a lot of fungal outbreaks on leaves and root systems, so it's not good for all trees. So the bottom line is, like humans, we all are adapted to slightly different conditions. And some people don't want to live in Delhi, but they want to live in New York. And some trees don't want to live in full rain-soaked soils, and they would prefer highly drained soils. And it is species to species.
Okay. Our last question in the chat is, do you encourage forest bathing to engage people to care about trees and tree conservation?
I just gave a lecture in Bali on Zoom with the inventor of forest bathing, who now says he has 65 institutions in Japan. I'm thinking the dollar signs, millions of dollars. These people pay a lot of money to go out and stand in the trees. And I'm like, could you possibly give some of that money to save forests? I didn't ask it, but I should, because it's become a very expensive industry, like resorts, and of course, forest bathing has been around for hundreds of years. Somebody just coined the term, but going into the woods with your kids, call it bathing, call it hiking, call it picnics, whatever you like, is the whole business of being surrounded by trees is so healthy for everybody. But you don't have to pay thousands of dollars to go to an institute to do that. You hopefully can do it on your own. And maybe you'll love trees so much you want to give to one of the walkways to save forests or whatever it is, because it's so important to save the forests and not to maybe pay a resort to go and stand under a tree.
All right, so the practice is good, but to maybe
Great.
put your dollars towards
Conservation.
more wisely. All right. Yeah, so I guess final question would be, we do have so much kind of grim news about climate and nature. It can be a little depressing, overwhelming. You've given us a lot of active things that we can do. What is there any hope you could offer young people that are interested in?
Total hope. I'm a mom, so that's really important to me. And that's why I wrote the last chapter of the book called Mission Green, about all the hope spots, all the 10 things you need to do, how we're trying to create these programs with canopy walkways to save forests. So yes, I'm a believer of hope. I'm going to leave it at that because you're a library, and maybe that will encourage people to read the book, because that's what libraries are supposed to do. And, it should give you some wonderful things you can share with your kids.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your enthusiasm and your knowledge about trees. I'm seeing some great comments in the chats and other patrons thanking you as well. The book again is The Arbonaut, A Life Discovering the Eighth Continent and the Trees Above Us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you. Save your big trees. Good night.
Thank you.